Thank you so much to all of our listeners for being here on Building Wealthy Habits. I am so excited for our guest today. J.R. Lay is a personal friend, someone that I've gotten to know really well over the last couple of years. Jeremiah and I have enjoyed all of our conversations with J.R. And before I get into like a formal introduction of his background, I like to tell you that my impression of J.R. is he is the man who asks powerful questions, and people like that in your life can be so dynamic, challenging, and also dynamic. But J.R. Lay is known as the Built Authority Advisor. He helps entrepreneurs become known, trusted, and paid for how they think without sacrificing what matters most. He supports founder-led businesses turn their lived experiences into intellectual property, a book, an authority platform that drives demand, speaking opportunities, and advisory work. Not only that, he's a two-time best-selling author, global keynote speaker. He's incredible. We are so grateful to have you on our show, JR. Thank you for being here.
It is my pleasure to be here and to share this time together, because I think the best gift that we can give to other people, particularly now in this age of artificial intelligence, is to share our authentic intelligence.
I love that. One of the many quotes, I've heard you say that before, I know on your podcast, which I'm a reoccurring listener. And one of the things that I love about your podcast, and I'm so excited to have you on the show, is that you get to, on a regular basis, sit down with dynamic founders that open up to you about not just their success that they've experienced, but as we all know, the risks, the failures, the pitfalls, the turnaround points, the rebound, the roadmap. I mean, you have a knack for these dynamic personalities really opening up to you and sharing with you their authenticity.
You bring up the point of their successes, and then you use the F word. you said failure. And I think one of the things that I really try to reinforce is you either can win or you can learn. If we remove failure as a word from our own vocabularies, then we will never fail. We will always be learning. And sometimes those lessons are very expensive lessons. They're very painful lessons. But those experiences and that pain can actually become a platform that we can transform to help someone else elevate and level up.
I love that. Failure doesn't have to be a part of our vocabulary as long as we can use it as material, kind of a launch pad. I was writing something this morning about disruptions in our stories. And sometimes we look back at those and maybe in our mindset, we think of them as failures. They can be little things too. Here we are on the brink of the summer schedule. That feels like a disruption from the school schedule, or bigger things. We have a business partner right now in the hospital. That's a big disruption, the unanticipated. And I can't help but think that we are a culture, I'm making a broad stereotype here, but Americans love to measure, track, plan, predict, set goals. And so what happens when, as entrepreneurs, we have these disruptions? How do we transform them into material for growth versus pitfalls and failures?
Yeah.
I believe a lot of it is perspective, because perspective is the sum of two elements. It's our context, but it's also the frame at which we gain that context. And when you think about the summer schedule and disruption, this comes back to intelligence. My wife and I, we have 4 kids, so we're right there. Like May-cember. I heard that term a couple of years ago, and it, once again, gave language to a feeling, to an experience. And I think language and words are extremely powerful. It's one of the reasons why, I love etymology. It's the study of the meaning of words, because words shape our perspective. And once again, it's what I've been teaching my kids. You're either going to win or you're going to learn. You can never lose. You can never fail. And just that alone has given them permission to take some bold risk, to transform what was a very negative, painful experience. I think for my number 3, he came home from school and was very distraught about the red marks on his paper and the number, I think it was like 40. I was like, what's bothering you? He goes, I failed. I go, who said? And he was
Mm,
looking at the 40 and the red marks. And I said, or is this just where you can continue to learn, and grow, and improve? And to see his confidence has continued to increase year over year because we've
Mhm.
eliminated failure as a word when we're going through a very period of disruption, not just May Simber, but at the macro level with artificial intelligence. I think for many people, even reading some of the headlines, there
Mhm.
are college seniors who are graduating right now that are booing keynote speakers talking about artificial intelligence. Just let's pause on that point for a moment because that's like graduating in the year 2000 and you're booing a keynote speaker talking about the future of the internet.
Right.
Or that's like graduating in the 1880s and booing a keynote speaker talking about the power of the steam engine.
Right.
This
Right.
is why perspective is so important, number one. But number two, when we talk about intelligence, there's a lot of different types of intelligence, IQ, EQ. But I
Mhm.
think the one right now that we need to be so mindful of is AQ, which is our adaptability intelligence, our adaptability quotient.
Well, I think that speaks a lot with the idea of framing of how do you see these things? Do you see this as a threat to you or a failure or something that didn't go the way you wanted it to? Do you see it as an opportunity to learn, to improve, to grow? Do you see it as something to step into? I think the beauty and maybe even the gift I think that you give a lot of your clients is taking something that was their story and framing it as valuable, framing it as something not to diminish, but rather to expand. And realizing it gives you a platform that's not just it's part of what happened, it's something I survived through, but to say, no, that is the part that allows you to share and connect and have empathy from and with others to really bring them along.
Mhm. Mhm.
We've connected with a few of the people who've worked with you and their experiences of working with you and coming out of that and saying, wow, I didn't know I could own my story. I didn't know that I had a brand, I had a message, I had a platform, I had something that other people care
Mhm.
about that I didn't realize and being able to mine
Mhm.
that for them. I think it really is a gift because it's this very personal gift of helping them adjust their frame, helping them adjust their
Mhm.
perspective as they go forward.
And yeah, finding the value. I remember reading in a book as a young person graduating from college about this idea that you kind of feel like you're just jumping from puddle to puddle and none of it really makes sense until you arrive at some sort of destination. And then you look back and you're like, that was a straight line. Like I didn't even know that, but I needed to pick up from this experience and that experience. And
Mm,
I think we would be remiss with our time together if JR, I didn't ask you to share a little bit of
Mm.
your own story as you
mm.
stepped into your entrepreneurial self. And I mean, arguably, you have always had an entrepreneurial mindset, but the shift, the decisions that you made to arrive where you are today, what were some of the impactful turning points in that journey?
Yeah, I definitely want to go there. I want to loop back to Jeremiah, something that you had mentioned, like owning your story. I think about the work that you do. That's an asset.
Mm.
When you can own your story, that is an intangible asset, not only for ourselves, but if we think about like legacy, that is the asset that we can pass down to our next generation. And if we think about what has connected people together throughout the centuries, the millennium, it has always been story. That's how wisdom was passed down. If we think about wisdom being transferred around a campfire, perhaps in a
Mm,
cave. We were reminiscing on the previous generation and the lessons learned from that generation. And then
Yeah.
someone said, no, we want to memorialize this. And so they got some ash from that campfire and they went and they painted on the cave wall. And it wasn't until the 1500s with the printing press that really communication was and the sharing of wisdom, which not knowledge. I'm being very mindful of
Mm,
those the distinguishment between the two because AI is commoditized knowledge. And I think that's going to be our advantage is the sharing of wisdom. And wisdom
mm,
comes from lived, learned, shared experiences. Your
yeah.
story is a valuable asset when you can see it from a whole different perspective outside of yourself.
That comment of drilling down just a little bit of,
Yeah.
and in the abstract, it's an asset, but we deal with families. The first generation was the founders. They've built it, they've grown it, they've increased
mm,
it. The second generation, often we call that like a G2, a
Mhm.
G2 mindset. They're trying to preserve it, they're trying to sustain it. But by the time you get to G3, that third generation, statistically, they spend through and they waste the wealth. And the big one that we have a lot of, we call them family meetings. We push a lot of clients, especially founders who have built something. Let's have some family meetings because those stories are not just esoterically valuable and an asset. They are specifically to your family, knowing your grandkids will not understand. They will waste this money. They will not have the life that will
mm,
be valuable to them unless they understand where this money came from, They understand what grandma and grandpa did, and not just in a, yeah, we run a mop company. They sell mops, but to say, no, we struggled, we worked, we were there. This is what this money did for our family. And when story can pass generationally, to your comment, like there is wisdom. There's a few people we've worked with a number of families, but ones where the third generation is thriving. They're not wasting it. They're not falling. They're not entitled, but it's because they understood the story. If your kids don't understand your story, they will never appreciate the wealth, the resources, the things that someone has built.
It'd be very interesting to do some sort of a study that if that third generation knew the first generation's narrative,
Mm.
how that impacts and influences that generation stories, values, purpose,
Yeah.
beliefs, identity. These are all things that I think are so critically important. Well, I want to come back
Yeah.
because you had asked about my own story. I'll give you the long story short. I
Well, we've got
came
lots of time. Don't shorten it too much. Don't cut out any good nuggets, okay?
There you go.
I didn't grow up and dream about doing what I'm doing. I actually, as a kid, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I think like a lot of kids back then, I wanted to be like Mike. If you remember the Gatorade commercial,
Yeah.
like Mike,
Yes.
I played basketball. That was my dream. Although God would have other plans for me because I was not the fastest. I couldn't jump the highest, but I developed this work ethic because in 8th grade, my coach said, JR, you're never going to play varsity basketball, son. And I'm like, you just watch me. And
Lit a
so that
fire.
he did, but it also was very dangerous too in hindsight because I became one of the very first. I was opening the gym, I was closing the gym, I was putting in all
Mm.
this extra time and energy. That work ethic is great until it becomes an Achilles heel because my entrepreneurial journey began when I was in 5th grade. And there was a neighbor, we were off on Christmas break. He was selling lemonade. And I'm like, wait a minute, Christmas break lemonade. I
Yeah.
said, you know what? I'm going to go and set up a hot chocolate stand right across the street from him. He's selling lemonade for 25
Ooh.
cents. I'm selling hot chocolate for 50 cents. And at the end of the day, I learned very quickly I could make more money by creating more value. I didn't know that as a 5th grader. I just was kind of being a jerk
Right.
and having a little bit of fun. But then I was like, okay, it just started to develop this mindset of like, where can I
Yeah.
create value? So that then led to cutting yards and washing cars. And when I was a junior or senior in high school, my dad was a computer engineer and my mom was a teacher. And with my dad being an engineer, we were one of the very first kids at our school to get high speed DSL. So
Heyo.
128 bit on the download. So you could download a song because like Napster,
Yeah.
LimeWire, everyone
Yes.
else is still on dial up in 56K. So I could get a song in like 3 to 5 minutes. I mean, think back. How much were CDs in like 99, 2000? You remember?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, $16, $18, something like
15?
that.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
like
And
15,
some of
12,
them were pushing
15,
like
something like
2022. And I said, wait a minute, high speed DSL and a CD burner. I went to school and became a song dealer. And
How
so
Love
I
it.
started dealing songs to kids. I was like, 20 songs for $10. What you want? And so that was just another type
Amazing.
of an entrepreneurial
Yeah.
venture that I had. And then I graduated high school, started waiting tables, and started another entrepreneurial venture, which was a punk rock band.
Now you got to get all the girls. So I mean, you got to do something a little edgy, right?
Well, and there was a girl. She would come to our shows, and then one day we're studying in the library, and she set me down and she said, "Your band, it's not very good. In fact, it kind of sucks." But she said, "Why don't you do something with your life?" And just the
Mm.
question, I think that's an important point to pause
Mm.
on. When someone asks us a question like that, and it starts with why, it
Mm.
opens the mind up into possibility. I think when we stop and we either ask why for ourselves or someone asks us why for themselves, if we can take the time to really critically think through that answer, that response, our lives can really change forever and for good. That's when I would say, like, I started a business. That business would grow. It was a web design business. It was in the early 2000s. And that girl and I would eventually get married. The problem is my last real job was waiting tables and playing in a punk rock band. I didn't know how to manage a business that would soon hit seven figures, start taking on real employees, payroll.
Mm,
So at that point, I'm
Mm,
like 27 years old and I didn't have the infrastructure for myself. So everything
mm,
started to collapse and implode within. And then I started to go down some dark paths, addictions. And then on October 4th, 2012, my wife, we just had our second child. She said, it's the family or the business. You need to make a
mm,
choice. And she was 100% right because I was struggling with a lot of addictions to mask a lot of pain. I have been there and you don't have to struggle alone. There's a lot of resources out there that can help you through that dark
mm,
valley because I
mhm,
promise you on the other side of it is a much bigger future. And when once again, she put me to the test. It's the business of the family. And I was like,
mm,
no,
mm,
I want the business and the family. But I knew I needed to start doing some real deep inner work to heal some wounds that I wasn't even
mhm.
aware that I had.
I see
that's
that
incredible.
you ask powerful questions because people asked powerful questions
Mm,
of you, notably your wife. Even in, age old wisdom, the idea of the fool as a character is that one who won't listen, doesn't take advice, just
mm,
babbles or continues to speak. And I think it's interesting that you're talking about this competitive advantage of wisdom in the day and age that we're living in, where AI is commoditizing knowledge, but where does wisdom
Mm.
exist in the sea of information? Interesting, the connection to powerful questions for those who will genuinely seek an answer and allow it to transform their path or their direction.
Yeah, and I think in hindsight, connect this back to my eighth grade coach. That work ethic of showing up, being the first and the last out, hustling, that took us to that October 4th moment because that's all I ever
mm,
knew. My identity was so attached with hustle and external performance that I really forgot who I was and why I was doing what I
mm,
was doing to begin with in the first place. And so when we are asked those powerful questions, we have to make a choice. We're either going to continue down the path that we're on, or we're going to pause and reassess, is there another way forward? Case in point,
Mhm.
when my wife basically gave me the ultimatum, I can't tell you why or how it just came to my mind. Go all the way back to the age of 14, which is when I actually met her. And on the wall, there was a poster that had the Robert Frost poem,
mm,
Two Roads of Virgin Yellow Wood. And I took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference. And come back to the cave painting. It wasn't just words, it was also a picture personifying the narrative. One path went to the right, one path went to the left, and in the middle was a bunch of trees. And so when she told me it's the business of the family, it was almost like path A or path B. And I can't tell you why, but it's like I looked at that poster as my entire freshman year, and it was right towards the end. I was like, well, what's the road less traveled? I know it's a very philosophical question. And then something dawned on me at the age of 14, 15. I was like, the road less traveled is not the one to the left. It's not the one to the right. It's the path down the middle. It's cutting through the trees. That's the road less taken because there's not a road there. It's the road that you have to go and carve yourself that no one has taken before so that you can see and experience the things that other people haven't experienced. You're going to go through the trees. You're going to get bumped up. You're going to get scraped. But every now and then you might meet someone who's taken that similar path. They're a bit further
Mhm.
along. That's where you should stop, pause, and ask them some really good questions because they're going to be the ones who can help you avoid some of the painful pitfalls that you just can't see.
When I was first introducing you at the beginning of our time together, I knew we'd come back to this idea of like, where can people hear more from you? You have a book. In fact, I just finished reading Banking on Digital Growth recently and had some quotes that I took away from that. You have several books. You also host a podcast, Level Up, which I have gleaned so much wisdom from. You have really compelling guests on the podcast. So, to our listeners, it's fantastic. It's actually ranked among the top 3% globally. Kudos to you. It's huge,
mm,
huge accomplishment. One of the quotes, and I kind of want to wrap up on this, that I pulled away from the book that I read most recently. I love that you said, at the end of the day, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Greatness requires it. And I think just that in and of itself has really bounced around in my head in the days that have been difficult. Most recently, as a business owner or striving for new growth, there's this constant push towards the uncomfortable. And every day you're met with this mindset of, what am I doing? What am I thinking? Why am I here? How did I get here? Right. And I love that quote has given me so much inspiration and like how do we get comfortable with the uncomfortable and what could be on the other side? Like grabbing
Yeah.
some curiosity, throwing that in our backpack as we hike up the mountain and try to see what new scenic viewpoints are along the way.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why did that perspective, that quote, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, greatness requires it. Why did that connect and resonate with you?
I think going back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier is I do feel like we're in a season of disruption, or maybe I'm noticing it differently. And those challenges are presented as negative at first to me. It's like I want to strive for what I can plan on, or it triggers this like control mechanism in me where then that leads to unhealthy habits oftentimes. Well, if I can manipulate this or control this, it's kind of the antidote to the lack of control or uncomfortability. And
Mhm.
yet when you're trying to achieve something you've never done before, if you're not stretching yourself beyond what you're comfortable with, you're not going to see the vantage point on the other side. And so that uncomfortability has become almost a new habit. Okay, what can I do today that feels uncomfortable? And turning my focus towards that as not only we acknowledge some of these disruptions that are just a part of life, but now even like seek them out. Let's shake things up a little bit and see what's possible.
I guess the question then becomes, well, what's the worst that can happen? Because then we can really see what is guiding us. Is it our faith or is it fear? Fear is just faith in reverse because we're still
Mm.
focusing on something. It's just the opposite of faith. When we get comfortable being uncomfortable, and look, I can write those words, but I can be the first one to tell you I'm not perfect at living them out every single day. There are still days that I struggle myself. Case in point, that book, when you ask about my story, things back up, 2012, blow that business up. Had an advisor come in and he said, I really think the best move for you is to blow your business up and start over and move into the advisory space in financial services. And he said, but if you really want to build that type of business, you're going to have to write a book. And I laughed at him. I'm like, his name's David. David, what are you talking about? What do I know? And here's the funny thing. I hear other founders tell me the exact same thing that I said all the way back in 2012. What David did is he planted a seed, and that seed would take 7 years for me to finally make the public commitment that I was going to write the book that you're referencing, Banking on Digital Growth. My business changed for the better because I was then bringing my wisdom to the world in a way that I was never able to bring it to the world before within financial services. So then I wrote another book, Banking on Change. And you referenced the idea of the mountain. That was the whole premise of Banking on Change because what I was noticing is I would be working with these different organizations in financial services and maybe 10%, 15% would apply the recommendations I was making, but the other 85%, they would have knowledge, but they would never integrate it. In hindsight, it's like the integration of knowledge is that's where the wisdom is found. But I was so frustrated as to why. Why weren't they changing? And through that experience, I had another inflection point in my own story because the idea for the business I have today came to me back in June of 2021. It was that strategic coach, and I was sitting down and I was putting these different areas of my life together. And it just hit me. I could do what I did for myself and help other founders through that experience. But I didn't have the courage at the time, back to your point. I had
Mhm.
found myself unconsciously, I had grown too comfortable becoming the person that I was, the
Mm.
entrepreneur that I was, the founder that I was. Until one day I get another question. My 9-year-old said, Dad, why do you come home with a dark cloud over your head? And the truth of the matter is I had built a business that I had learned to love to hate. And I
Mm.
realized that my time was up. And the only reason I was staying around was because of the identity that I had built around that business. It was no longer who I was being called to be. And so when we think about the idea of stories and narratives, we will have these points in our life to where there's a call to move, there's a call to leave what we know, get out of the boat, to walk on the water in faith. And we can see this over and over and over again. I mean, take the story of Moses leading the Israelites, the Hebrews out of Egypt. What happened? I've lived this story myself. It's like, okay, great. I sold my business back in October of 2025 so that I can fully go all in to do what I'm doing now. But I also found myself in that time period thinking back to, well, what if I just did this? What if that's all the past? It's like we can then step out into a new journey, into a new adventure. But sometimes we might feel like we're just wandering around in the desert aimlessly. But if we're connected to a bigger purpose, if we're connected to the wisdom of infinite intelligence, and we have the confidence and the faith that this is why I am here, this is why I'm being called, I think that's an important part of all of our stories just to pause and ponder on for a moment. It's not who have I been, it's not who I am now, but it's who can I become, but even more deeply, who is God calling me to become? And being open to listen to that, number
Mm,
one. But number two, if it is being called to become more or beyond where we're at today, to be able to step out of the boat in faith
mm,
and walk on water for a bit.
So many words of wisdom, JR. I love the idea of faith versus fear. That fear is just faith backwards. I love so many things that I wrote down. I have just so greatly appreciated our time together. I love that I know I get to continue this dialogue at the places that we get to interact. Thank you. Thank you for being on our podcast today. Thank you for sharing some of your authentic wisdom. I truly hope it's our listeners and that they go follow up and listen to more on your Level Up podcast. So, JR, do you have any last words for our listeners today?
I think the most important thing in a time of disruption is to continuously be focused on what is going well for
Mm,
us. To your point, you said yourself, it's so easy to kind of focus on the negative. And this is something that I wrote about in my second book, Banking on Change. That's just the way that our minds are wired, they're threat detection systems. And it's like if we're aware of that, our minds will tend to go towards the negative. We can also
mhm,
then rewrite the story, rewrite the narrative, pick up the pen and focus on what's going well. And at the end of
mhm,
every single day, a very easy reflection in a journal, on a piece of paper, in a conversation with your kids is just to go through the W, which is where have you been winning? The E, so that's the past. The E is
mhm,
what are you energized about? That's the
mm,
present. The first L is learnings. So what did you learn that day? You can always flip a quote unquote failure into a lesson.
mm,
mhm,
And then the second L is looking. What are you looking forward to most tomorrow, next week,
mm.
next month, next year, next quarter? And that little simple framework I have taught so many teams. And the feedback that I get is, my gosh, this just helped my team. This helped me around the dinner table with my family because that's some of the
Yeah.
things that I
mm.
brought to my kids when I developed this. If I don't ask them what went well, they'll be the first one. Dad, are you gonna ask me what went well today?
Aw.
So yeah, when in a time of disruption, we can
Mhm.
consciously focus on all of the good in our life and what went well.
Great.
Love that. I love that. Thank you so much. And we'd love to have you back in the future for more of this. So thank you so much, JR.
Thank you both.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.